Okay.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our webinar series that is introducing, or rather our webinar that is introducing the Braille Sense Polaris, a device that we're very excited about here at Sight and Sound, and that you'll be learning a lot about in the next hour or so. I should say you'll be learning a lot about it, but we're kind of scratching the surface. So we're very excited. My name is Stuart Lawler. I'm the, as you can tell, I'm not from the UK. I'm from Ireland, and I look after Sight and Sound's services here in Ireland. And I'm also the company's specialist lead for Braille products. Angus is here with me. Angus is my colleague from Sight and Sound in the UK, Angus Tukey, and Angus is going to be looking after, I suppose, the session today in terms of managing questions and answers and helping to make sure things run smoothly. So Angus, if you want to say a few words.
Hi everyone. Yeah, thanks. As Stuart said, thank you so much for joining us today and giving up your time to come and learn about the Braille products and this in particular Braille product, the Braille Sense Polaris, and how it can be used in education and its functions and everything like that. It's one of the latest and most advanced Braille products available right now, and yeah, I think Stuart's really looking forward to telling you a bit more about it. So as Stuart said, he'll be leading the session. I'll just be here to support. So you'll notice that you're all muted. That's just the standard feature with the Zoom webinar, just so that the screen isn't jumping around all over the place as everyone talks. If you've got any questions, if you've got anything that you want to add or say, as Stuart said, he will be stopping at different times throughout the webinar to make sure there's ample time for you to get questions and answers in. But if there's anything else that you want to say, get in immediately, there's a Q&A section which should be accessible to you somewhere within the Zoom app, where questions will pop up to me. And there's also the chat, the Zoom webinar chat, where you can put questions in there. So anything that you want to add or say, please feel free to jump in there. And that's it. So I'll hand you back to Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Angus. And yes, absolutely. Please do engage, do ask us questions. We're looking forward to your feedback, of course, and your thoughts. Now, so as I mentioned at the start, I use the Polaris, and I'm really excited about what the Polaris does in the classroom. And much of what I do over here in Ireland is actually supporting teachers and students and others to use the Polaris. I also happen to be totally blind, so I'm going to attempt to do this, and I'm sure Angus will give us some feedback visually. I'm going to attempt to show you the Polaris on video so you can see what it's like if you haven't seen one before. So I'm going to hold it up, and I hope you can see it okay, Angus?
That's excellent, Stuart. Yeah, just a bit back towards you a little bit.
A bit back towards me. Okay, brilliant. A bit up.
That's perfect.
There we go. So this is the Braille Sense Polaris. The Polaris comes in two sizes, and the only difference is the size of the Braille display. 32 cells or 20 cells. I have the 20 cell version, but there is nothing else that the 20 cell will not do. So the functionality and the applications you see today are the very same on either. I would recommend that the 32 cell version is obviously better in a classroom setting because you have more Braille space to read from. You see your Braille keys here. Regular traditional Braille keyboard, dot 7 and dot 8 at either end of the keys of the keyboard. There are a couple of function keys that I'm just touching here. On the left hand side there, F1 and F2, and on the right hand side, F3 and F4. I'll make reference to those in a while. Here's your Braille display with your all-important cursor routing keys. I'm always interested when I do these sessions, I say to people, do you know what cursor routing is? And people who've been using Braille for a while don't know what it is. So I sort of always thought people knew about cursor routing, and now I've stopped that. So I just want to very briefly explain why cursor routing is so important. When you're blind and you're reading maybe a large piece of Braille, a large piece of text, and you need to edit a particular area in the document, and you're reading and you find the place where you want to edit, you can press the cursor routing key above the cell where your finger is on, and that will jump the cursor to that point in the document rather than you having to scroll and find where it is. So it's a really handy feature to quickly navigate through large amounts of Braille text.
Sorry, so can I just ask you to just move it back and up a little bit more? Just
Yep.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you, Angus. There are two square keys at either end of the Braille terminal, and that's to pan the Braille forwards and back. And those keys can be configured independently. So maybe somebody wants to be able to browse in one level by sentence and in one level by line. They can be set independently. And there's a couple of switches here at the bottom of the Braille Sense Polaris. One switch is to lock the keys in place, and a couple of buttons here to control media playback, because the Braille Sense Polaris, as you will hear in a few moments, does all sorts of things, not all related to the classroom, and some of which you may not want your students doing, by the way, and we can talk about that a little bit later on. So I'm going to move the Braille Sense Polaris away from the camera now. That was just so you could get to see it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen so that then you will be able to see the Braille Sense Polaris screen, and you will also be able to hear the speech. So just give me a moment whilst I do this, and whilst I then kill my jaws, because it's bad enough having me talking and the Polaris talking, and then you'd have three voices talking, and poor Angus wouldn't get a word in at all. So let's share the screen. And let me just do this, and then switch off JAWS. Okay. And
File Manager.
Now you should be able to see, Angus, the screen of the Polaris on screen.
Yes, we have it all there.
Brilliant. So let's just talk for a second, because we're talking about the screens. Screen sharing on Polaris, how does it work? Well, your Braille Sense Polaris has a HDMI port, so you can plug it into a standard monitor or into a TV if you wish. Many schools, in fact, we sell the Polaris with these little portable screens that are really handy. You can carry them around with you. But some teachers said to us last year, it's fine, but we're plugging the thing in and there's a cable and someone has to carry it and inevitably something gets lost. Can you look at a different solution for us? So we started looking at what's called screen mirroring using an application called TeamViewer. And what TeamViewer does is it just transmits the Braille Sense Polaris output to a screen, to another screen. And that screen can be your mobile phone, it can be an iPad, it could be a tablet, it could even be another computer screen. So you're sitting beside a student using their Braille Sense Polaris, and you're able to see in real time what they're doing. And that's kind of what we're doing here today. So I've shared out my screen so that you guys can see it. I've also shared out the sound of the Braille Sense Polaris so that hopefully you'll be able to hear it. And if anyone is having difficulties hearing it, please let us know by raising your hand or putting a message in the chat or whatever you need. So I'm going to briefly talk about what the Polaris is. I'm going to go through the main menu to talk about some of the functions it has, and then we'll break for questions before we get into looking at some of the specifics. So the Braille Sense Polaris falls into the realms of what we call a Braille note taker. It's a portable solution like a Braille tablet, I suppose, offering us access to word processing, email, web browsing, calculator, and a whole lot more. And I say a whole lot more because it is an Android tablet. So you can go onto the Play Store and you can download apps to install onto this thing, which is the really interesting part about it. So the Polaris is a really nice aid or a really nice add-on for somebody who's using other technology or for someone who's not using any technology. And it's also a really nice, and it provides maybe a very nice transition for somebody, maybe a young student who's starting off with a note taker to then go and learn Windows. And I say that because a lot of the keystrokes you'll use on the Polaris have very similar equivalents in Windows. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we use particularly the word processor. So I'm going to just very briefly go through what you would see when you turn on the Polaris. When you turn on the Polaris, you get the Polaris main menu. Think of it as your start menu or your desktop or whatever you like to think about these things as. And you'll see on the screen that you'll see the name of the name of whatever I'm focusing on in print, but you'll also see at the bottom of the screen the same text in Braille. So the Braille line is shown visually to the sighted user. So again, if you're working with a student and you want to be able to see what they're doing in Braille-wise, you can see the focused Braille line at the bottom of the screen. The first option here is the
File Manager.
Thank you.
F.
The File Manager. And the File Manager is exactly what it says. It's where you manage your files. You copy files, you put files maybe onto memory sticks, you can upload files to cloud storage, because this is, remember, an Android system, so you can connect to all sorts of services. So the File Manager is where you manage the information on your Braille Sense Polaris.
Word Processor. W.
This is the word processor. You'll also notice, by the way, as I go along, so it said File Manager F, Word Processor W. It gives me the shortcut letter or shortcut key to open that particular application. And seasoned Braillists will use shortcuts all the time, and I'm sure some of your students are using them already. We always train people to use the menus and to use the shortcuts, so that if you forget a shortcut, you can always fall back to the menu. So here's the word processor. We'll spend a bit of time in the word processor in a couple of minutes. And the word processor, you will get a feel. It feels very like Microsoft Word.
Notepad. N.
This is the Notepad. The Notepad is very like the word processor, but it does a few different things. It is the application you use if you want to send information to a Braille printer from your Polaris. It's also the application that you might use if you want to open large files but are not worried about the formatting of those files, so that in that instance they would open quicker and it's easier for you to read.
Email. E.
This is the email application. Sort of, I guess it kind of does what it says on the tin. It's to read and manage your email, but there's another email application that you'll see here.
Exchange Email.
Called Exchange Email. This is new, and this is to support Microsoft email addresses, specifically the kind of corporate email addresses that are found maybe in schools and in the workplace. So Office 365, for example, Microsoft Exchange on-prem, those kind of things are supported by the Exchange email client, but it is virtually the same as the other email program, and we'll be using Exchange email in a little while, because Angus and I have a little exercise to show you how email works.
Media. M.
This is the media menu. There is, if I just open it briefly,
Media Player.
a media
M.
player to play music or MP3 files or audiobooks perhaps.
FM Radio. R.
An FM radio, which you probably do not want people accessing in the classroom.
Daisy Player. D.
And a Daisy player. If you use that format, Daisy Books, then you can have your Daisy Books played through the Polaris.
FM Radio. R. Media.
Back to the main menu.
Organizer. O.
And I'm purposely not going through every keystroke because I'm very conscious of our time, and I'm conscious that this is an introduction to the Polaris. But saying that, if there's a particular keystroke you want to know, or if you have follow-up questions, I'm more than happy to share my contact email at the end of the session so you can keep in touch. Here's the organizer.
Address Manager. A.
So this is like your contacts application on your phone. Address Manager holds all the information that's on your Polaris, and this information can be synced from any number of services such as Microsoft or Gmail. So if you have an account somewhere else, and for example, my contacts sync on my iPhone, and if I update a contact on my iPhone, it automatically gets updated on my Polaris. Very handy.
Schedule Manager.
The Schedule
S.
Manager is like a calendar. So it's used a little bit in the later years in school when people want to put in their classes. Maybe you have a recurring class every week. Maybe you want to set a reminder for something. So you can do all these things here.
Organizer.
Going back to the main menu.
Webtools. B.
These are the web tools.
Web Browser.
This is
B.
your web browser.
Google Search.
And your
G.
Google Search, which gives you a very simple and clutter-free way to search for information. I will say right now that the web browser is not the Polaris's most redeeming feature, I suppose, exciting feature. But I will also say that I don't know that any Braille note taker really has web browsing at its core. And that's because the web is evolving all the time. The web changes daily, as we all know, especially nowadays. And browsers on specialist units like Polaris probably find it a little difficult to keep up. One way around that is, again, because this is an Android system, and you can install something, for example, like Chrome if you want. So there are alternatives available. And one of the things I have to say, one of the things I enjoy doing in Sight and Sound is kind of helping someone to customize something like this for their own use. And in some ways, if you come to us with a challenge, we kind of love that, you know. So let me go back to Webtools.
Extras, X.
The Extras has a couple of things in here. I'll just briefly mention these.
Excel Viewer, X.
So you can view Excel spreadsheets on the Polaris. You can't edit them, but you can view them. But again, I go back to Android. Because it's an Android device, you can open a spreadsheet in Google Sheets. How you will get on with that will largely depend on how the spreadsheet has been created. And in terms of Android applications in general, the experience will vary depending on the accessibility of the app.
Online Daisy.
Online Daisy is unfortunately designed only for the Canadian market. The Canadian Library for the Blind at CNIB has a Daisy service that they use.
Sense Dictionary.
Sense Dictionary. Okay, this is a dictionary service that I don't have installed, but we do have a special at the moment to include this. So you can get dictionaries for English, French, Spanish, Italian, and I believe German for the Polaris. Really handy, again, for schools.
Extras. Utilities.
This is the utilities menu. There's a whole load of things in here. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I'm just going to tell you a couple of things. The calculator is in here, and we will be visiting the calculator in a few minutes. And there's also an option in here to upgrade your Braille Sense Polaris firmware. Like any other company, like Apple and Google and Microsoft and all these other guys, the people who make the Braille Sense Polaris release frequently enough updates to allow the Polaris to do new and exciting things. And it's here that you go to install these updates. We will notify you as well whenever updates are available. And in fact, the Polaris even notifies you itself. So if you're using this, you can connect and find the updates.
Settings, S.
This is the settings menu. There are so many things in here. I could have probably pulled 5 webinars together for Angus just to talk about settings. So we're not going to go into it at all, but you can understand there are lots of things in here, from changing language and Braille code and voice speed and loads and loads of other things.
Help, H.
And this is the help. So the really nice thing about Polaris is that the help system has the entire user manual. So the entire user manual is built right into this. You can also get something called context sensitive help, and that means help relating to wherever you are at this moment. And I'll show you the online context sensitive help in a little while.
File Manager.
But this is a good place to take a little break, because there may be questions and there may be people who want some clarification. So Angus, I'm happy just if there is anything to take it now, otherwise we'll keep going.
There's nothing queued up at the moment on the chat or in the Q&A, but yeah, just to reiterate to everyone, if you do have any questions, please feel free to just either raise your hand and I'll give you the option to then use your microphone to talk, or put it in the Q&A box or the webinar chat, and we will answer it yeah, when we stop for these periods.
When I'm doing presentations and someone says there's nothing there, no questions, I either say, well, that means everyone's completely happy or everyone's completely confused. So I'm hoping it's the former. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So let's look at a couple of the applications. I'm going to actually start with, I was going to start with email. I'm going to start with the word processor. We'll have a look at the word processor in brief, show you some of the things it can do. Then we look at email, and then we look at the calculator. And then I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about things like language switching and how some recent changes to Polaris OS have made that a little bit easier. So we're back at File Manager. We may remember as we went down through the menu that the shortcut for the word processor is W. So I'll press W right now. and my word processor will open.
Top of document.
And my Polaris helpfully says top of document, and I can feel my Braille cursor here, dot 7 and 8. You guys can hopefully see that on the screen as well. And the word processor in Polaris feels very like Microsoft Word, especially maybe the slightly older versions of Microsoft Word. So you have a new document, you're open and you're ready to start typing. I'm going to Braille something on the Polaris. I'm going to Braille slightly slower than I normally would. That's because there's a very slight lag with my Polaris because I'm connected to this wireless system so you guys can see the screen. So let's try this.
Hello. We are now testing the Braille Polaris period. Space. Polaris.
So
Happy Easter. Space.
So I've just
Easter.
typed in some text, and there are some shortcuts that actually are not unique to the Polaris at all. By the way, these will work in pretty much any Braille system that you guys experience. So space with dot 1, 2, and 3, or L, will always bring you to the top of your file. And by the way, when we say space with something, we often refer to them as chord commands. So L chord, for example, and they say chord because it's a bit like pressing 2 or more keys together. It's like playing the piano. So space with L.
Top of document, hello.
And top of document, and it said hello. And I'm able to read, and I'm able to use my panning keys, these square keys at the right and left of the Braille display that I'm just going to lift up to show you again. There's the panning keys, 2 square keys at the left and right. They pan the Braille forward and back, and the left keys will do the same as well. There is also an auto scroll feature. So again, for Braille readers who don't want to have to press those panning keys all the time, you can turn the Braille display to automatically scroll after a specified period of time. So it could be on a mini device, on a 20 cell Braille display. I would say a reasonable time is an absolute max of maybe 10 seconds. But you can go longer or shorter if you want. If you're a very quick Braille reader, you might go shorter. So
top of document, hello.
I'm navigating along here. I can navigate by word.
We are now testing the test now.
And I can also press my cursor routing key if I want to jump to a particular letter. So I've put my cursor now on the W of we, because I pressed the cursor routing key directly above that letter, and now I can see my cursor underneath the letter W. Now, I mentioned the function keys on the Polaris there when I was talking about the layout of the unit. There are 4 function keys in total, 2 on the left of the spacebar and 2 on the right, and they're labeled F1 to F4. So F1 and F2 on the left, and F3 and F4 on the right. F1 will always bring you back to your main, let's say, start menu or main menu, to the file manager, to the very first option in that start menu. So it's a really nice way to, if something goes terribly wrong, press F1 and you'll get back to the start. Okay, so it's like, don't panic, press F1. F2 will bring you into the menu specific to the application that you're in at the moment. In this case, it's the word processor. So when I press F2,
File, F, pull down menu.
It's bringing me to what we call the menu bar. This is the file pull down, or it said pull down menu. Pull down means when you press enter, it opens a list of sub menu options relating to file. So we'll see those in a sec.
Edit, E, pull down menu.
That's the edit menu.
Insert, I, pull down menu.
The insert menu, etc. I'm going to go back over to file.
At file, F, pull down menu.
And I'm going to press enter.
New, N, dialog, enter N menu item.
And you can see that Polaris is telling me lots of things. New, dialog, enter N. It's giving me the shortcut keys I can press. And for new users, for teachers, for people who are just looking at this machine, this is hugely helpful. But for advanced users, this stuff can all be turned off. In fact, many advanced users will turn off the speech altogether and just operate with Braille. But let me just show you how shortcuts work. I'm going to go down to the save option.
Oh, save, S, dialog, enter S menu item.
And I'm going to press enter here to open my save option.
File save dialog. File name.
So
No name.
it's asked me for a file name. I'm actually going to cancel out of that for a moment. So I'm going to press cancel, which is space with Z, space with dots 1, 3, 5, and 6.
Hello, we are now testing.
And I'm actually now going to save, go back into that save option, but this time I'm not going to use the menu. I'm going to use the shortcut key. And you may not have heard it, but when we were browsing down to save, Polaris actually told me it was Enter and S. So I can hold down the Enter key, dot 8, sorry, which is to the right of dot 6. I can hold down dot 8 and I can press S, and
File save
it
dialog.
brings me right back to that file save option where I can save my file rather than having to press F2 and go through the menu.
Hello, we are now testing.
I'm back into the main document, and if I forget to save altogether and I close my document, it'll say to me,
No name.doc save. Yes prompt button.
so no name, because I haven't given it a name, so it's very creatively calling it no name. Would you like to save? And we'll say no to that.
No prompt button.
And press enter.
Word processor. W.
I should also say that the Polaris supports a whole load of Braille codes, but comes set to UEB by default, and I think that would be probably what everybody in this room is using at the moment. Angus, I'm happy to take any word processor or questions from the previous section at this point.
You'll be happy to hear that everyone is getting it. I think there's no questions.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's talk about email. And email is one of the things that I suppose we do pretty early on in the learning process of Polaris, I suppose. And maybe just to try to tease that out a little bit for you, the way in which we suggest people might learn Polaris is take it in small chunks. So what I've done with you there in the word processor, getting to grips with that, for you as sighted teachers, getting to understand how that works, getting to recognize the prompts and understand how to respond to them, understanding the main menu and how to navigate, and how that F1 key will always bring you back to your file manager. And then the next main ones, I suppose, are email and the calculator. So I mentioned the fact that there's two email programs. One is for Gmail and I suppose non-Microsoft email clients, or rather services. And the other is the Exchange email application for Microsoft email services. So I'm going to go to my Exchange email because we use Microsoft Office 365 at Sight and Sound.
Notepad. Email. E. Exchange email. L.
And I'm going to open my Exchange email by pressing enter.
Getting new message list.
So Polaris helpfully tells me it's getting a new message list.
From Tesco Ireland Info Customer Service.
So actually my Polaris has opened my personal email first, because that's my main account on this device, and it's it's telling me I have an email from Tesco Ireland, which I will read later, but not now. So let's issue a command to tell the Polaris actually switch over to my work email.
Getting new message
I want to
list.
use my work account to send an email to Angus.
Stuart.
Yeah.
Unread.
Just before we go ahead with that, I've got one question here relating to the word processor.
Yes.
So the question is, can you Braille technical notations directly into the word processor? An example, centimeters squared, math symbols, etc.
Yes, a great question. There is a math mode in the word processor. So yes, you can put in math code into your documents. You have to turn it on and turn it off, but you don't have to leave the word processor at all to do that.
Excellent.
So yes is the answer. Okay, I'm in my inbox and I'm going to create a new email to my friend Angus, and I'm going to actually also send him a file attachment, because most of the time, I suppose, people are emailing attachments. You might want to email homework. There's maybe exercises somebody has done in the word processor, and they want to email them to their teacher. There are lots of shortcuts within the email application. They can all be accessed from within the menu systems, but for just for a little more speed, I'm going to use the shortcut keys. So enter with W will allow me to write an email. So I'll press enter and W.
2. Edit box.
So I'm in my email compose dialog now. Who am I going to send this to? There's a couple of ways I can do it. Angus is saved in my contacts, so I have his email address already. If I didn't, though, I could type in his email address here in UEB, and if there are contractions, I can use the contractions. And I could also open my contacts application that we looked at earlier, the organizer application, and pull Angus's email from there. But I'm going to just type. I'm going to type the first few letters of his name. Actually, that should be all I need to do. ANGU. That should give us enough. And I'll hit the tab key, which is dots 4 and 5 with the space bar.
CC. Edit box.
Now, I want to just make absolutely sure that it did fill in Angus's name. So let's press space with dots 1 and 2, which is the equivalent of pressing Shift and Tab to go backwards and see is Angus's name filled in.
2. Angus Tookie Angus Craft Accountant Co UK Edit.
Okay, so Angus Tookie is in, and it also gives Angus's email address.
CC. Edit box.
I don't want to copy this email to anyone.
BCC. Edit box.
And I don't want to put anybody into the BCC field, which is the blind carbon copy.
Subject. Edit box.
So in the subject, I'm going to just type file.
File.
Attachment.
Attachment.
And I'm going to tab again, space with dot 4 and 5, and I'll be in my message box, my edit area.
Message body.
Message body.
Multi-line edit box.
Word I was looking for. And this is where I can type my message. So I'll just say, hello, Angus.
Hello. Angus, comma. Space.
Could you?
Angus, comma. Could you review this attachment? Please question, space. Please enter.
And I'll say Stuart. Okay. Now,
Stuart.
the only file I have on this Polaris that I can send Angus is a letter that our then 8-month-old son Adam wrote to Santa. So maybe Angus can make his wishes come true. Let's see what we can do. So I'm going to send this to Angus, and then we're going to stop my screen share momentarily, and Angus is going to share his screen so that you guys will be able to see the email and open the file attachment and see it in print. This is a Word. This was created in the word processor on my Polaris and saved as a Microsoft Word document. So we press Enter and F because I want to insert an attachment.
Attach file dialog. Audible folder 115 list item.
I want to look in my Documents folder.
Daisy folder 3, Documents folder 4, Adam Santa letter. Selected Adam Santa letter December 1st, 2019. Docs 1
There we
4.
go, Adam Santa letter, and it's a .docx file, which means it is a modern Microsoft Word document. We'll press Enter.
1 attached.
One attached.
Stuart.
So I'm happy enough. I've wrote a quick message to Angus, asked him would he review this for us, and I'm now going to send it with Enter and S.
Sending. Successfully sent new message.
So now
Unread. Has attachment.
I've sent Angus an email. I'm going to just temporarily switch off my screen share, and I'm going to ask Angus if he can share his screen. So just a moment.
Most certainly. So let's go like this and share my inbox. So hopefully you can all see my screen now. So you'll see that Stuart's email's just come into me here. So I'll click on that, and as you can see, it displays as a normal email should. There it is. Hello, Angus. Could you review this attachment, please, Stuart? The attachment is attached in the normal way. I'll just click on that there, and there it is.
Brilliant.
And as we can see there, Adam is wishing Santa a very safe trip on Christmas Eve.
There you go.
And he's kindly going to ask for something to be left out for him. I'm not sure what you did leave out for Santa, Stuart, but
he did get a mince pie.
Ah,
there you go. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent.
Go. Yes.
So yeah, as you can see, that all works normally and as you would expect. So I will just hand back to Stuart now.
Okay, thank you, Angus. I'm going to share back my screen. Just one moment. And let me just do this. Sorry now. And hopefully you're able to see my Polaris screen again, Angus.
Unread
Yep.
from. Silence.
Okay, back.
So I'm going to close my email application. The email is
Exiting
really powerful.
email. Exchange email.
And the Exchange email in particular, now that
File
we have that,
manager.
we have support obviously for Microsoft email services, which was something that we didn't have previously. It might be a place just to pause for a moment, see if there's any questions on the email application, Angus.
We don't have anything queued at the moment, but
okay.
As with the other one, the question sort of came in just after. So
yeah.
If anything does come up, I'll let you know.
No problem. Okay, let's then look at there's kind of two more things I'm going to do, and then we'll open it up to some general questions. One is the calculator, and then I want to talk a little bit about a very new feature that's just been brought into Polaris, and that's something called macros, which is very useful for switching languages. So the calculator is something that everybody wants to be able to use, and it supports UEB math. Now I want to say this with a little bit of a health warning. UEB math is not prominent in the States thus far. It is getting there, but it's very much Nemeth still, the older Nemeth code. And the Polaris is actually programmed in Korea and tested extensively in the US. So UEB math has been to date a little bit of a work in progress. So what we always say to someone is, if you find something in UEB math that does not work properly, let us know, because Selvus, the company who make the Polaris in Korea, are extremely quick to respond and extremely quick to make changes, and they will fix issues or inconsistencies very, very quickly. So if you find something that doesn't work, please let us know. When I learned maths, it was SEB code years ago, so my UEB maths is rather limited as well. So with the health warning done, let's open the utilities menu, because remember the calculator we saw is in utilities. So rather than going through my menu, I'm going to just press U, which is the shortcut to open utilities.
Calculator, C.
And look at that, calculator is the first option, so we'll press enter.
Start calculator.
Now, before I do any calculations, I want to talk to you about this context-sensitive help that I mentioned a few minutes ago, because it's particularly useful for the calculator. And I have to say, it's particularly useful for me because I've just mentioned that UEB maths wasn't around when I was in school. So I struggle sometimes when I'm demoing the calculator and someone says, Stuart, what's the sign for whatever? And I'm saying, I need to check that. There's a really quick way with the context-sensitive help. So context-sensitive help on the Polaris means that every program has help unique to that application. And in the calculator, they very helpfully give us pretty much every sign in UEB math that we'd want. But before that, I need to make sure I'm in UEB math. Otherwise, I'll get the signs for computer Braille or the Nemeth code. So I'm going to press backspace and G, which will let me toggle between the available Braille codes in the calculator.
Calculator Braille code, computer Braille.
Okay, so
0.
I could use computer Braille if I wanted, but I don't want to, so I'm going to go again.
Calculator Braille code, Nemeth.
So I don't want Nemeth either, but I do want the next option.
Calculator Braille code, UEB math.
Now,
blank.
Once it's in UEB math, it'll stay in UEB math. If you close the calculator and open it again, it will still be in UEB math. And I think it was already. I just wanted to double check. I'm now going to press space and H to bring me into the help function for the calculator, the context sensitive help, which will list pretty much every UEB math symbol that this thing has available.
Right parenthesis, .5, .3, 4, 5 list item.
Okay, this has brought me back to the place in help where I was the last time I was looking at this, probably the last time I was looking up a sign for somebody actually. So let me get to the top of this long list of commands by pressing space with dots 1, 2, and 3.
Clear display, backspace C, dots 1-4, list item.
So clear display is backspace and C, and the Polaris helpfully then tells me the actual dot pattern as well. You can turn that off, by the way. You don't have to have the dot pattern.
Delete last number or function, backspace list item.
So delete last number or function is backspace. Let's just scroll down a bit so we hear some of the actual signs.
Add, .5, dots 2, 3, 5 list item.
So I find this really helpful, right? Because in SEB, the plus sign, or the add sign as they're calling it, was .56 with dots 2, 2, 3, and 5. So I've had to learn this new code a little bit. So I find it really helpful to go in here and look at these.
Minus .5 .3-6 list
There's
item.
minus.
Multiply .5 .2 5 6 list item.
Now I'll just scroll down a little bit quicker, just because there's loads of these. For example,
over .3-4 list item. N space list item. Sign enter S .2 3 arc sign enter S .2 3 4 .1 list item.
so these are the sine, arc sine, cosine, hyperbolic sine in the scientific end. So you can see there's loads of stuff here. I'm going to come out of that help, context sensitive help, by pressing escape, which we did earlier, which is space with a Z.
Help closed. Blank.
And I'm going to
Blank.
just do a simple enough calculation using my UEB math code. So we'll use the numeric indicator as we would normally, and we'll say
Number sign
175
175
times
multiply by
6
number 6
equals
1050.
okay. So now I have that calculation in my calculator. I actually want to copy it into the word processor. Okay, so I'm doing a piece of maths homework, and I want to stick this into a Word document I have open. So let me, first of all, open my word processor. So I'm going to press F1 to go back to my file manager.
File manager,
I'm
F.
going to press W for my word processor.
Top of document.
I have a new blank document, and I'm just going to title it Stuart's Maths.
Student apostrophe S T.
It would help if I wrote my own name properly.
IN. Stuart apostrophe S. Maths period. Enter, enter.
Right, let's go to what's called the task list. We can switch between open applications on the Polaris again. It's an Android application. You can have as many things open as you want. So I'm going to press, again, I do this with function keys, F2 and F3.
Task name, settings. Task name, settings. Button navigate up. Task name, calculator.
Here's my calculator.
1050.
So my sum here is 1050. I actually want to copy the routine of how I did that. So I want to view my calculation history to see how I reached 1050. What did I do to get to that point? So I'm going to press Enter and H to open my calculator history.
Calculation history dialog. 175 6 1051 3 list item.
Now I have my punctuation turned off, but on my Braille display, and you may be able to see this yourselves, I have 175 multiplied by 6 equals 1050. I want to copy that sum. So to do that, I'm going to press Enter and C. I mentioned earlier that some of the shortcuts will feel very like Windows shortcuts. When you're in Microsoft Word, you press Control and C if you want to copy something. When you're in Polaris, you press Enter and C. So let's press Enter and C.
Copy complete.
And now I'm
175 6.
going to go back to my word processor.
Task name, word processor. Blank.
And here we are at Stuart's Maths.
Blank.
Hopefully.
Stuart's Maths.
Brilliant. Stuart's
Blank.
Maths.
Blank.
Paste my answer. In Windows, if you want to paste something in Word, it's Control and V. And guess what? On Polaris, if you want to paste something, it's Enter and V. So let's do this.
Paste.
And now I can see in Braille.
Blank. 175 times 6 equal 1050.
And the Polaris reads the mathematical syntax out to me properly as well. Okay, I can, those shortcuts for being able to copy and paste, you can use those throughout the Polaris system. So if you're selecting text in the word processor and you want to copy something, you can press enter and see. If you're selecting a file, maybe you're moving a file from one folder to another, or you're moving a file from your Google Cloud storage, for example, to your file manager on your local Polaris, you can press enter and C to copy, enter and V to paste, enter and X to cut. And I'm just going to very briefly talk about Google Cloud storage. One of the really great things about Polaris, again, because it's a Google device, is that we now have access to Google Drive built right into the Polaris operating system. So you don't need to put a third-party program on to allow you to access your files on Google Drive. So for a user of the Polaris, this is a much easier and much quicker way to get access to stuff. And if you're a Microsoft person like I am, and you're using Office 365, I think this is coming because we have asked for it. So I think that will be in the next big update to Polaris. So let me just close my word processor.
No name.doc save, no prompt button.
Homework.
175 6 1051 1050.
And then I'm going to open
General settings.
My file
Word
manager.
processor, W. File manager, F.
I just want to very briefly show you when I open the file manager.
Flash disk 1-2 list item.
I see two options. The first is flash disk, and the flash disk is the internal memory of the Polaris. The second option is
Google Drive 2-2 list item.
Google Drive. This is my cloud Google Drive. When I press enter here, the Polaris takes a moment.
Audible folder 111 list item.
I'm now connected to my Google Drive. We're not viewing anything on the Polaris here. We are viewing stuff in the cloud. So if I didn't have connection to the internet, I wouldn't be able to do this. But the point is, we can now manipulate and navigate within this folder structure as though we were on the BrailleSense Polaris itself, and we can move files around. It's a really handy way to be able to do things. Okay, just
File
before
manager.
we take questions, because I'm sure there may be some, and some people may have thoughts, and there may be things I haven't covered, by the way, that you may want to talk about. I just want to very briefly flag something called the macro manager, which has just been added in the most recent Polaris update. So if you've come to this session, by the way, and you have a Polaris, or your student has a Polaris, an update was released on Tuesday with Exchange email, which we've seen, Google Drive support, which we've just glimpsed at, and something here called the macro manager. A macro is a routine that you can assign to a keystroke. So for example, I might have a keystroke every day that opens my email and checks for new messages without me having to scroll down to open the email application. I might have a keystroke that logs into my Gmail and opens a specific folder so that I'm not having to frantically look around for it all the time. But I've found a really good use for these when it comes to Braille codes, because people need to be able to quickly switch between Braille codes. So I've set up a few macros that allow me to very quickly switch to whatever Braille code I need to use. And Polaris has, I believe, now 18 Braille codes available. So if I press my keystroke to list the macros I have available, these are ones
macro list dialog.
Shows these are ones we did earlier.
Irish 3-3 list, German 2-3, French 1-3 list item.
These options will switch Braille codes only. So this option here, French, if I pressed enter, would switch me to the French Braille code.
German 2-3 list item. Irish 3-3 list
here's
item.
Irish, and I'll just switch to Irish just to show you.
Execute macro. Braille Irish. Options saved.
Now,
file manager, F.
You probably heard a load of stuff there, but what was actually happening was the Polaris was jumping into the options menu, changing the Braille code really quickly and saving the options, rather than me having to do it with a whole load of key presses. If you can see the Braille display, you'll notice that file manager, that the brackets around the letter F for file manager have now changed because the Irish brackets are slightly different. So we're viewing the Irish Braille code at the moment. You can set a macro then that would not only change your Braille code, but that would also change your speech. So let's say you're doing German and you have a German synthesizer on your Braille Sense Polaris. You can set a macro that first of all goes in and changes your Braille code, and then goes in and changes your speech so that you're ready to go in German within a couple of seconds. Again, an Android device can have a whole load of different synthesizers, a whole load of different languages, and there are many, many to choose from. Polaris itself has, I think, about 60 voices across about 8 different languages. So there's lots there to choose from. And that's only on Polaris. There's so much else out there as well. So I am going to stop and take some questions, because I've actually went a little out further than I thought in terms of time, so my apologies. I hope it's been useful. It's sometimes hard to pitch things like this because you're not sure if it's too much or too little, and I'm very conscious that some of you may be at slightly different stages. So you can either type in the chat, you can raise your hand. If you want to speak, we can unmute your microphone if you'd like to have any comments or any clarification. And Angus, I don't know if there's any questions.
There's nothing queued at the moment. Ah, here we go. We just got something in. Thank you for the question. So the question is, how does the Polaris cope with Method 2 for foreign languages?
With Method 2, can you do you mean with speech?
How does the Polaris cope with Method 2 for foreign languages?
When you say Method 2, I'm just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, I can. If you would like, Jane,
yeah?
I can unmute your mic, or
that might be good. Yeah, if you want to speak.
I'll just do that now. It looks like. Oh, there we go. Hi there, Jane.
Hello.
Hi, Jane.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi. So Method 2. So that's the educational Braille code for different languages. So it's not the native Braille codes. So for example, with Spanish, it's all in UEB, uncontracted, but the accented letters.
Yes. Okay. I've clearly everybody learns at these webinars because I've just learned what Method 2 is. Now I understand. So in other words, what you're saying is UEB is the base language.
Yeah.
Yeah. My understanding is where that's available, that is supported. It's not in Irish because UEB isn't the base language for Irish.
Right.
But in, I know in Spanish it certainly is.
Yeah, and French and German, the common school languages.
Yeah, I haven't had feedback that I haven't had that feedback before. So I'm not sure that it's not, but I know because we dealt with someone with Spanish lately, and that was fine.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thank you for letting me know about the question. Yeah.
We've got one more question in here from Chris. It says, how does it link to an embosser? We have an Index Everest D5 at the school.
Yeah.
And also printing. Do you need to download a printing app?
Okay, so Embosser first, it will link via USB to your Embosser, and when you emboss from the Notepad, you don't have to install anything. The Polaris does the work for you. Wireless embossing should work. We have not successfully had it work. It depends on the manufacturer of the embosser, and indeed HIMS or Selvis, who make this Braille Sense Polaris, haven't tested all the embossers yet. Printing, yes, you download, for wireless printing anyway, you download a driver for your printer. So what we've done in many schools is there may be a printer, a centralized printer, maybe in the secretary's office, or there might be a big photocopy printer thing that everybody uses. We connect the Polaris to that, and once it's on the same Wi-Fi network, and once we download the driver, it's good to go. And again, there are things we can talk you through.
Excellent. I believe that's all the questions we have for now. Thank you for your questions, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much for your questions.
15 hours.
I'm
File Manager,
telling me the time.
F.
I'm very happy to share my email address in the chat. Sorry, I should have done that before because I haven't put it in there. But Angus, if you want to type it in,
Yep,
people are more than welcome to get in touch if there's something you would like to follow up on. There is an offer on Polaris at the moment, by the way. So until the 30th of June, there is a significant reduction on the Polaris 32, not the Polaris Mini. But to be honest, the Polaris 32 is what you'd be using in education anyway.
That's right. Yes, HIMSS have actually extended an offer in response to everything that's going on with coronavirus, etc., and people needing more support at home. So they've done quite a generous offer actually, which adds the dictionary in. Usually the device comes as one, and then the dictionary is an add-on which costs £152. So this is the device and the dictionary, which is a total cost of £3,228. Usually that would be £4,395. So you're looking at quite a large saving there.
Yeah, it's a great price. And the one thing I would just say to finish off on is that one of the things that excites me most, and that actually I feel quite honored to do, and is like visiting schools and talking to people about this technology, but more so seeing the reactions of kids who are using this stuff for the first time, of Braillists who realize this Polaris, people love the keyboard, people love the feel of the keys, the flexibility in terms of the options, and I suppose the significant customizations you can make to the machine to really build it to do what you want. So again, thank you very much everyone for attending. We have another webinar next week, by the way, next Thursday. We're going to be talking about Zoom Text, which is screen magnification, Zoom Text Mag Reader. So for people with low vision in the classroom, it's a really good solution. And Sam Coulson will be presenting that, and I'll be with him as well. So if you want to register for that, you can do so.
Yes, that's right. We'll be doing. I think we did a post actually that went up via Lubka on the forum yesterday. We will be doing these sessions weekly, so with Stuart or with Sam. So Stuart will focus mainly on the solutions for blind people, and Sam will focus on the solutions for people with partial sight. The next one coming up focuses on Zoom Text, which will be at the same time next Thursday, and that will cover, as I said, Zoom Text, which is a software, which is a magnification software for use on computers, and also has a reader function built into it as well. But yeah, I'll leave that up to Sam to cover next week. In the meantime, stay safe and stay well, and thank you for your attendance, and we look forward to seeing you next week or at a future session. As Angus says, we're going to be running these over the next number of weeks, so look forward to catching you guys soon. Have a happy Easter and an enjoyable break.
Thank you for coming, everyone.
Bye-bye.